Hello, my name is Emily. This month is February, which is Black History Month, and today I bring you an encapsulation of U.S. slavery within the antebellum South and a deep dive into disability among enslaved communities, and how this all connects to modern-day racism and ableism being two inherently connected forms of oppression. Just to begin my video, I want to state that I am just a white middle-class student just doing a research project. I do not have first-hand account of what it's like to be a person of color in America. I have never experienced racism on a first-hand basis, and my disability is not inherently visible, so I live a very privileged life. And with that being said, I will try my absolute best to be respectful and considerate of the people of color and disabled individuals who live through this reality every day. Now let's get started. The first ever ship carrying African slaves arrived in the British colony of Virginia in 1619, carrying about 20 to 30 slaves. This was the beginning of the institution of slavery in America and would lead to a huge economic boom in the South. Hundreds of ships carrying slaves were imported to America and sold to farmers. These farmers mostly farmed corn, rice, sugar, tobacco, and most of all, cotton. Cotton and the invention of the cotton gin, a machine that made cotton harvesting faster and more efficient, was the catapult that made slavery the huge institution that it was. But in the year 1807, the eloquently named Act Prohibiting Importation of Slaves of 1807 was put into effect. This made it so slave ships could no longer be imported into America from other countries. But slave traders saw this as just a little bump in the road. In the early 1800s, there was only about 900,000 slaves in America, quite a small number compared to the insane 4 million slave increase in the 1860s. Despite slave ships no longer being imported into America, the population of enslaved people almost tripled. This was because of chattel slavery, which is defined as slavery in which a person is owned as an item of tangible, movable, or immovable property, except real estate and things, such as buildings, connected with real property. It basically means that enslaved people were seen as property and animals to be bred as well, cattle. Eventually, laws were put into place to prevent enslaved people from possibly running away or revolting by making it so they were not allowed to gather in large groups, arm themselves, they were forced to work imaginably long hours, or given little to no food. And if any enslaved people tried to run away or break any of these laws, they could receive a large variation of horrible punishments. This went from selling their family, whippings, beatings, or being taken to the very extreme of cutting off toes or feet to prevent runaways. And this brings us to disability within enslaved communities. Often slaves were not born disabled, but became disabled from their enslavement. Limbs were removed as punishment, injury would happen from long working hours, or machinery they used could injure them. Many slave quarters were in poor conditions, so many enslaved people would fall ill and become disabled, or they could lose limbs from frostbite. Disabled slaves were seen as even less than other slaves by their masters, and because of this, they were very hard to sell. This made many disabled slaves the rock for separated families. Many of them could not work, but despite this, they still played a very key role in communities they served. Disabled enslaved people could care for enslaved children and make it so mothers working in the field could see their children during the day and interact with them or feed their children. As described by the esteemed Frederick Douglass, disabled slaves were being able to do very little, but bearing heavy burdens, in regards to an enslaved woman who had lost her hands in a fire when she was a child. Many elderly slaves were also considered disabled as they were beaten down by their masters and the work they had endured every day. Once an enslaved person reached a certain age, they would be turned out to die by being set out free where they could send them into the woods to fend for themselves. Because of the correlation of the antebellum period, racism, as well as ableism, these two forms of oppression are highly linked even now in modern-day America. In modern-day America, we have the ADA, or Americans with Disabilities Act. It was put into place in 1990, and the ADA protects Americans with disabilities. As defined on the ADA's website, it says it prohibits discrimination on the basis of disability, just as other civil rights laws protect discrimination on the basis of race, color, sex, national origin, age, and religion. Despite the ADA being in place, it's just the beginning to including disabled people into everyday life instead of pushing them aside. Many people of color all over America have shared their experiences of being discriminated against or disregarded when it comes to their pain or disability online. I have included some amazing blogs written by disabled people of color in the description, along with my other documents, including all of my sources, some of which are my sources and others I just think would be good to read. Many issues that people of color face regarding disability or accessing healthcare include chronic pain being played off or not taken as a concern, not being given enough pain medication in a prescription or after a procedure, especially when Black women receive an epidural before they give birth. People of color are less likely to be offered a seat on a bus or train even if they are visibly disabled, such as on crutches, with a cane, on a wheelchair, having prosthetics, or visibly struggling to stand. And people of color who have mental or learning disabilities, such as autism, ADHD, schizophrenia, depression, dyslexia, or any other manner of differences in the brain chemistry, are often underdiagnosed or never go diagnosed, and they live a harder life because they think or learn differently without an idea or explanation as to why. Because people of color continue to face discrimination in various ways in the United States, this tends to push Black people further into impoverished neighborhoods and communities. And because of that, they are less likely to be able to afford certain forms of help, like going to see a doctor, seeking counseling, or a diagnosis. It's a cycle that continues to become an issue for many Black Americans. All the way from slavery up until now, the hardships they face may not be as bad as in the 1800s, but there is still room for improvement and growth and acceptance in America when it comes to our disabled and racially diverse friends. Thank you so much for watching my video, and I hope you're having an amazing day. Bye!